Mullins. I'm the director of the Master of Professional Writing program here at USC, which is a 2-year multi-genre program. We are a self-selecting program in a way in that we tend to attract students who are interested in writing across genres, nonfiction, creative nonfiction, fiction, writing for stage and screen, and poetry. And we're a 2-year graduate program. It's a terminal degree. And tonight, we're so thrilled to have with us Patrick Alvarez of the film. We're still doing some multimedia things here, so just enjoy the background spectacle. Patrick Alvarez, whose film Easier with Practice is based on a true story. It's based on a story from GQ magazine by Davey Rothbard. And Iris Yamashita, whose film Letters from Iwo Jima is based on a book of the same title, and takes a historical incident. And then rounding out our panel is Bill Wheeler, whose film The Hoax takes on this story of a confidence man who pulled off a great scheme, and it's a wonderful story. So I want to give special thanks to Howard Ho, who's in the back of the room, for all of who's filming this for podcast. Thank you. And also, I'm going to welcome visitors and MPW students and faculty, and also for MPW students only. I'm sorry, we only have room for MPW people. But tomorrow night at 7, Robin Swicord, who adapted Little Women, Memoirs of Aisha, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. She's visiting an intellectual commons with M.G. Lord's science writing class, and she's going to be talking about her new film, which is she's working with heart surgeons on her new film. So that's open to MPW students only. But our 2 events after that, on October 11th, Rebecca McClanahan is speaking on Why Did the Writer Cross the Genre? It's a cross-genre conversation. November 1st, Dinah Lenny is moderating Faith in the Imagination with Eric Lax, Mark Saltzman, and Heather King. And the psychologist, whose name
Justin Wood.
Justin Wood, and they're talking about the synapses in your brain and what makes faith and what makes imagination and how writers turn that into material. So, and what we're doing here tonight is we're talking about how writers use true stories, and this panel has been convened and designed by our own Prince Gomolvilas, who teaches here at the MPW program, and whose play is running across town, even as we speak, at East-West Players. Because, as many of you know, I'm really pretentious. I always like to have lots of quotes, so I only have 2 tonight. John Ashbery says, we see us as we truly behave, and that's why we're so interested in mimesis and art and representation. And then I was talking to Iris, and I were chatting beforehand, and she was talking about a director she's currently working with who reminds her of Gandhi, and I was thinking of this great thing I read that Gandhi said. He said, writing itself is an experiment with the truth. So what is it that draws us to true stories? And I was thinking, too, we love the idea that we truly do something a true way, that there is a true way that something's been done. So and as you feel questions and associations brewing, save them, because after the presentation and the panel discussion, there's time for Q&A, and then there will be a reception. I also want to point out that in your program, you'll find a raffle ticket, and tonight we're raffling off DVDs, and I'll just show you what else you'll get if you win the raffle. You'll get a beautiful MPW t-shirt in your size. We have them in many sizes, so the MPW logo. So fill out your raffle ticket, and Prince will be overseeing the raffle, as he is overseeing the entire evening. So please join me in welcoming Prince Gomolvilas.
Hi everybody, thank you for being here. How are you? Are you excited? We have a powerhouse of talent in this room tonight. What we're going to start by doing is we're going to kind of give you a little bit of context by showing you the trailers of the 3 films written by our guest panelists. How many of you have seen 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 of the films that will be? Oh, great, great. Okay, this is for the benefit of you 2 who did not do your homework. All right, so let's go with the first one. Thanks.
Hello?
Hey there. What are you doing?
Who are you?
I'm Nicole.
I think you have the wrong number.
I think I got the right number. What are you wearing?
Clothes? What are you wearing?
Nothing.
Okay. Hi, my name's Davey Mitchell, and I'm going to be reading from my collection of short stories called Things People Do to Each Other.
I heard you read tonight. Is this like what you guys do for a living? 2 brothers in a car, armed with only your talents, the dark, lonely, and endless road stretched out in front of you. It's just whatever you want, whenever you want.
And it's just like that, and much less exciting. Hello?
Hello?
Nicole?
I'm horny, Davey.
I should take this. It's important. Wait, you're all about sex. Can't we talk a little bit? You know, like cuddle? It's nice to meet her. I haven't actually met her yet. Look, I need more than this. I want to meet you.
I think that there's something so special about this, and I don't think we should mess with it, okay?
Okay, I just thought it would be nice. While we were on our road trip, Davey had this like really fucked up phone sex relationship with this girl he never met, Nicole. At least I don't cheat on my girlfriend. At least I have a girlfriend to cheat on. You're the closest thing to a girlfriend I've ever had.
McGraw-Hill is not publishing your book. Book gone. The bond has dropped.
I've had it!
Clifford Irving had nothing
Well, my life is at hand. I don't have a couch.
until
I got it.
he told a little white lie.
I'm working on the most important book of the 20th century.
Couldn't you have just said of the decade? Howard Hughes, the billionaire,
It's exclusive, authorized autobiography.
and sold it
How?
for big bucks.
I want an advance to $1 million.
$1 million? As soon as they find out it's a fake, they'll sue you for libel.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Clifford Irving.
Getting the money was the easy part.
Now you can still back out, but you gotta tell me now.
Back out.
Yeah.
No, what are the Musketeers?
Getting away with it was another story.
It's got everything here, the syntax, the speech patterns, everything. Take a picture, you can photograph a government document. You can take a memorize, I'll take a picture.
Handwriting experts told us your letters from Mr. Hughes are
Authentic.
Do you understand the power this gives us?
Your book is genuine.
It's a masterpiece. I promise. Yeah.
How do you respond to accusations that you've made all of this up?
What is this?
This spring,
Grand larceny, mail fraud.
this isn't a prank anymore, Cliff.
They will do anything they can to destroy it.
How far can you go
Give me the truth. They will sue for making false representations.
Before the truth
Okay, look, what happened was, no, let me talk.
I'm completely flabbergasted by it.
catches up with you.
Mr. Living, who cashed the check, sir?
The hoax.
The more outrageous I sound, the more convincing I am.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's guest of honor is from the Empire of Japan.
How would you feel if America and Japan were to enter war?
The United States is the last country in the world Japan should fight. 本日付で私は自分の兵が待つ任地へと向かう。国のため忠義を尽くし、この命を捧げようと決意している。
おめでとうございます。召集令状です。
ありがとうございます。お国のため精一杯ご奉公してまいります。
もはやこの島は孤立したも同然だ。
メリケンの勉強しておられるんだよ。だからどうやって打ち負かせるかも知ってんだよ。
誓いを採用構築する。地下に潜って徹底抗戦だ。どうしたか。祖国のため我々は最後の一兵になろうとこの島で敵を食いとどめることが責務である。生きて再び祖国の地を踏めることなき者と覚悟せよ。行きましょう。我々の子供が日本で一日でも長く安泰に暮らせるなら我々がこの島を守る一日には意味があるんです。
花子、この手紙が届くことはないだろう。でもお前と赤ん坊のことだけが気がかりだ。
I lived in California for a while.
Oklahoma is where I'm from.
この手紙軍人として止血すべきだ。ここでこのまま死ぬのと生きて戦い続けることと
戦局最後の葛藤に直面する。残っているのはライフルだけです。今や弾丸付き見つかれとこしえにお別れ申し上げる。職人の霊に投げ出し黙祷を捧げる日が必ずや来るであろう。世は常に所持の戦闘にある。
All right, I'd like to welcome Kyle Alvarez, Bill Wheeler, and Iris Yamashita. Please give them a round. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thank you very much. Cool. Kyle, I just kind of wanted to get a little background on everybody before we started talking about the film specifically. Kyle, you were already working in the industry when you were embarking on making your first feature, right?
Yeah, I was working, I moved to LA after film school, and then I was working as an assistant for about a year.
Assistant to whom?
To Warren Beatty for a year. And that was a great experience, but I wanted to make a film. So I put in my 2 weeks notice after I'd done a year of work there, and during my 2 weeks notice, I opened up a GQ magazine and then read this article and realized that I wanted to make, that was the movie. You know, I had deliberately forced myself into a position where I needed to make a movie, and then this article came along at the perfect time, which I was really grateful for.
You moved to Los Angeles from Florida?
Yeah, from my.
And so, did you always have the intention of becoming a filmmaker, or were you unsure what you wanted to do in the industry? Or?
No, I went to film school. I moved out here with the intentions of writing and getting my first writing and directing film off the ground and figuring out any which way I could to make that happen.
Cool. We'll talk a little more about that in a little bit. Bill, you come from a theater background, correct? Or you studied theater in school?
I did.
Where'd you go?
I went to NYU and I went to the acting and directing program at Playwrights Horizons Theater
So, did you study writing at all, or was that something that you had aspired to back when you were in school? Or?
I mean, I like generically aspired to it. I didn't really study it, except that I remember a dramaturgy class where we just read a lot of plays and really studied it pretty intensely, and I just noticed that I was enjoying that class probably more than the other ones. So the interest was there. I wasn't as on that track when I was in school.
So when you moved to Los Angeles, what was your intention in terms of your career?
I have no idea. I came out here, very little clue, how it would all work out. It was a very, I had notions of maybe hopefully working as an actor, or my brother and I wanted to make a sketch comedy show or something. So it was really more. I think I came out more just for the adventure of coming than the stage guys.
And so when did you first get an inkling that you might want to start writing screenplays?
Well, my 23-year-old brother sold a script for $500,000, so that was a little bit of an incentive.
What script was that?
He wrote an action script when he was very young. It was just this sort of crazy thing that happened. It was so unusual, and it sort of sparked interest among all of us. So I started thinking, maybe screenplays. Maybe that's the thing.
So even before the Hoax, you had written one screenplay that was produced, correct?
Yes, I did. I wrote a screenplay called The Prime Gate.
And that came about through your theater connections? Because I saw that Gregory Mosher directed the movie. He's a big theater director.
He is, yeah. Well, actually, Gregory, I think, was just someone we thought of that we were hopeful might be interested in the material. We got it from the film went through the Sundance Screenwriting Lab, and they were very helpful in helping us contact Gregory and getting it to financiers, and so that was really a big part of helping me get that movie.
Cool. Iris, I come from an Asian American background, so I know from personal experience that most Asian American parents do not encourage their children to become writers or artists. Is that true for you?
Very, very true.
What did they encourage you to become?
Well, I majored in mechanical engineering. So I did not go to film school or pursue any of that. Although I did, I always kept writing as a hobby, so I minored in literature writing.
Cool. And then you got your start writing fiction, correct?
I guess you could say that. I entered a few short story competitions and won those, and then it was just a hobby, of course. So I still was planning to write the great novel, except that I could never finish a novel. So that's when I started taking classes at in screenwriting.
And so what drew you to? Was it that you could finish screenplays? Was that what? Really? Okay.
Yeah, it was actually that I could finish a screenplay. It's 100 to 120 pages with a lot of white space, and I thought I can actually finish a screenplay. So that's what got me into screenwriting. But it was still, I was working a full-time job as a web programmer while I was doing that.
How did you come aboard the Letters from Iwo Jima project? How does one get tapped like Denise would? How does a first-time screenwriter who hasn't had anything produced before?
Well, I had been screenwriting as a hobby, and I entered a competition, and from that I got a hip pocket agent at CAA,
You want to explain pickpocket to people who might not know?
A pickpocket agent is the agency will not actually sign you, but this particular agent, really liked my work, and so before she could sign me, she just said, "Well, I'll be your pickpocket agent," which actually turned out to be really good because she does all the things that an agent does anyways, but maybe not give you as much attention. Like out of 5 calls, she might actually take 1 with you, or you might hear from her in a period of a year instead of like every week. But Paul Haggis was at CAA, or is at CAA, and so
Paul Haggis, who is a screenwriter and director, and who wrote Flags of Our Fathers,
yes,
which is the companion piece to Letters from Iwo Jima. So I just want to give a little context. So did Clint Eastwood always have the intention of making both movies?
No, he didn't have that intention from the beginning. What I heard was he was doing prepping for Flags of Our Fathers, and Paul had already written the script. And while he was prepping, doing some research, he came across this information about General Kuribayashi, and he got some of those letters that he wrote to his family translated, and he was very interested in. He became interested in that side of the story, and then he. From what I heard, he originally approached Paul Haggis to also write that perspective, but Paul Haggis was in the midst of a number of projects. He was doing post on Crash. He had other projects lined up, so he was really way too busy to handle another movie. But he was executive producing, and so he was looking for the writer to write that side. And because his agency was the same as my Hip Pockets, that's how my agent found out about the project, and just kind of said, "Hey, maybe you can go for it." But we were both sort of like, "Yeah, right." Not like I'll ever get that. But I just happened to have some scripts. I had a script that was written around that time period, like it was just kind of on the verge of World War II, taking place in Japan. So that was a good sample script to send. And then I had another kind of based on true story script, and we sent those out to him, to Paul Haggis, and he liked those scripts. So I was able to actually get the meeting with him, and I already knew what the idea was. They had this character, General Kuribayashi, so I went in with my take, including this character and then some other characters, and pitched that. And by some miracle, Paul Haggis liked it, and that's why I got the job.
In retrospect, it seems like you were perfect.
Yeah, it's very rare, where all the stars align, and you just happen to be there at the right time, at the right place, with the right script or whatever. It's just, just don't.
It takes a certain amount of talent and charm too. So, yes. Bill, how did the hoax fall in your lap? Was that something that you sought out? The hoax is based on a memoir by Clifford Irving, who wrote about his experience.
Right, he wrote a memoir called The Hoax that was his account, a highly unreliable account, but it was his account of what happened, this hoax that took place in 1971, where he told publishers that he had written this, he collaborated with Howard Hughes on Howard Hughes' autobiography, which at the time was sort of unimaginable. Hughes was this recluse. And so this was Clifford's version of the book. I actually was not sent the book. I was sent by a producer who I had met.
Bill, I'm going to interrupt you. Can you speak into the mic? Let's see.
Yeah, sure.
We're having. Yeah, just closer. That's right. Thank you.
He actually didn't send me the book. He sent a 20-page treatment that I guess one of the people there had written up that had a description of the events. And I was not aware that it was a true story. I thought that there was sort of a period made-up thing. And my main sort of worry about it or complaint was that it just wasn't credible, that no one would buy it. Or believe that this had happened. So it was great to find out it was true. And so they wound up hiring me to adapt Clifford's book. And so that was, and originally did it for Mark and Paramount, and then wound up, Paramount turned it around, and it bounced around for a while before we finally found it.
And why did they think that you were right for this particular project?
I think that they thought I was right for it because the first film I had written, The Prime Gig, was about telephone con men. It was about guys that worked in sort of a boiler room, and so I guess they felt like Clifford was a con man, and I wrote about con men, and you'll come across this sort of as writers, we get typecast, everybody else does. So if you happen to write about one thing, and people like that one thing, they will think, oh, so I'm very unlikely to get a wonderful Japanese novel, and Iris is probably unlikely to get thing about comments.
Kyle, so you said that you had just happened to come across this article in GQ one day, or did somebody give it to you, or?
Yeah, no, I just picked up the magazine like any other magazine, and didn't have any kind of representation or anything like that. I mean, I just quit being an assistant, and so when I read it, I really liked it. I really liked the angle on it. I really liked the way he wrote about himself. So Davey Rothbart, who's known for having created Found magazine, he's on This American Life a lot, and he writes for many major Condé Nast publications.
Was he doing all that at the time?
Yes, absolutely. He definitely was. And actually, just after I optioned his article, Steve Buscemi optioned his book of fiction and is writing like an anthology movie around it. And
so how did the whole optioning thing work for somebody who hadn't done anything before, just in terms of filmmaking?
So basically, I read the article, I liked it, and I called up a friend who was an assistant at an agency. And I said, hey, do you have any way of finding out if this is available? Who do I talk to? And so he called Davey's agent and said, called from the agency. Didn't say that I was rep there. Didn't say I definitely wasn't even hip pocketed there. And said, hey, well, do you know this is available? And I mean, had I just called on my own, they would have never followed through. And so they put me in touch with Davey, and Davey and I talked and got along, and we figured out the option. I still didn't have any lawyers or agents or anyone, so I kind of made the mistake of negotiating the option myself and signing an option agreement myself without a lawyer reading over it. Fortunately, it ended up working out okay. Davey and I are friends and everything, but I definitely could have learned a hard lesson there along the way in terms of signing and paying money for something I didn't, when I didn't totally understand the contract, even though I did try to read as many books and understand all the legalese of it. But and then so I got the rights to it, and so essentially I mostly emptied my bank account into the option.
So this is one of those credit card movies.
Yeah, the movie itself we got financed, so that was fortunate. But in terms of the option, and I have done that again now. I've also put a lot of my own money into an option, but it was it was really important to me, and I really liked the material, and I knew what I wanted to do with it, and felt it was would be compelling enough to write a script about and get out to try to start getting out to financiers.
So what was the budget of the film?
The budget of the film was under $1 million, I say, so it was not over that. But that includes our costs of our self-distribution in theaters, the 35 film festivals that we played to and shipped to and traveled to, and the production costs, everything, all encompassing is that.
Were there specific elements to the article that really drew you, that said this is the film that I want to be my first film? What was it about that article that just really jumped off the page for you and you sort of envisioned as a movie?
Well, I think that without sort of giving away the ending, because it does kind of rely on the ending a little bit, but when I read it, it wasn't so much what happened, but the perspective he took on it. And a lot of people I remember telling me, like, this story's kind of broad enough that if you changed it, you might not really need the option. And I was like, no, but it's not really the story, it's how he wrote about the experience of it, the sort of the angle he took and the sensitivity and the perspective. And that was what was new to me. And that was what, I wouldn't have thought of it that way. That's what I got from him, from Davey as a writer. And it was just really sensitive, and it took material that I think otherwise could have been really mishandled and did something really sincere with it. And I just kind of wanted to replicate that onto film. But I mean, it was only a 3-page article. Then I have to turn it to 100, I think it was 110-page script.
Right. Bill, what was it about Clifford or his memoir that made you think, oh man, I could write a really good script based on this tale?
Well, there's a couple of things. I think that as writers, we're drawn to characters who do things, that have very powerful desires, and then do things in the world to make those desires come true. And one of the things that I was most drawn to and most impressed by was how, after this con that he conceived had began, at every turn, like every time there was some kind of a problem or an obstacle, or it seemed that he was about to be discovered, he would always double down. Like he would sort of jump twice as far, say something twice as outrageous, or do something so distracting. And I just thought that was such an appealing, interesting characteristic to look at, that I would say that was probably the main draw.
Paris, so what kind of research did you do for Letter? So it's not actually, the screenplay is actually not based on a book, correct? You had a bunch of stray letters or something. So tell us a little bit about the background.
Yeah, the only material I was actually given was a collection of letters that General Kobayashi had written to his family, and actually most of the letters were from the time that he lived in America. So it was kind of sparse as far as actual war, the Battle of Iwo Jima. So I had to go to a lot of other sources. So I read a lot of books about Iwo Jima, which gave the American perspective. The Japanese perspective was a lot harder to find. There were some sources, and then there were things like a diary that someone had written after the war had finished, and he wrote it as if he was recalling his time every day on the island, which that was very helpful. And that gave me a lot of good information, because it was uncensored. Because there were other diaries that were found on the island that were confiscated as military material, but the tone was completely different because it was censored. It was you say what you're supposed to say. So finding that gem of the diary that someone wrote after was really great. And then I just looked at, because that information still was really sparse, I read a lot of letters from Japanese World War II soldiers that weren't particular to Iwo Jima, but from other battles, so I could get a really good sense of what they were thinking and what they were feeling at the time.
So, Bill, I understand that you also you interviewed Clifford on a number of occasions.
No, it was actually only once.
Once.
I went to New Mexico to talk to him, and it was an odd experience. I mean, I wasn't sure what to expect, but he as it turned out, was a very unreliable sort of an interview subject, as well as being unreliable in terms of his book. And so part of the challenge of adapting material, but also part of the fun of it, was trying to figure, because he told stories, and a partner, his producer Josh Maurer, who worked with us on the movie, and Clifford at different stages in the process, a year or two earlier, had told Josh all these stories about, like he told us the helicopter story, which opens the movie, where this helicopter comes down to the Crown, almost lands on the roof, and then leaves, and that was part of the hoax of pretending Hughes was in the helicopter. And so one of the first things I said to him was, "This is amazing that you did this. You brought a helicopter to McGraw Hill." I said, "Oh no, that never happened." No.
Even though he had told somebody else.
Even though he told somebody else. So part of what I tried to figure into the creation of the screenplay was this whole notion of playing with truth and playing with the not knowing whether something was completely true or not, and playing with the idea that he was telling you things that sometimes were contradictory, and I guess not wanting to be the hyper fact checker to necessarily do a sort of documentary accurate version of what had happened, but to try to go with the spirit of hoaxing. And and really sort of tell the story from the perspective, even if sometimes it was a little bit of a warped perspective of this main character.
So it was your intention to actually take everything that he said, or most of what he said, at face value?
I tried to take it somewhat at face value, and on occasion there would be sort of I can't remember exactly. I know there would be bridges too far that I would decide, I don't know, that seems to see me. Either because it wouldn't be credible or because it would slander someone, or I would decide not to go there. But on the whole, we decided, and we actually wound up writing in press notes for the film, giving people an accounting of what, obviously the vast majority of the events that took place in the film are accurate, but there's also poetic license that I took, and then there's some things that are in there that Clifford told us about that turned out to not be true. So we just tried to outline for people, this is what is in the movie. And, I guess the spirit of something like Philip Roth's novel, Operation Shylock, where something is sort of presented in a certain context for people so that they know what they're getting into as audience members.
Right. Kyle, did you consult with Davey Rothbart while you were writing your script? I mean, did you see early drafts? Did you outline with him, or?
He wanted to. For me, it was, when I told him, my angle and my perspective on him was, I said, I like the story, I like the way you told the story, but I don't necessarily want to make a Davey Rothbart movie. He's not. It's not like he's he's not in the public spotlight, But it wasn't, my interest was in taking the story and the way he told it, but not necessarily being like finding an actor that looks like him, or finding someone that'll act like him, or writing a character to act like him. And that's actually what appealed to him about it.
Was you even changed the last name of the character?
Yeah, changed the last name of the character to imply, even the brother. He has a brother, a younger brother, but I completely invented the character, so I changed the first name. Kind of just to say, hey, this is based on this did happen. But, at the same time, we wanted to make a compelling movie out of it, and there's no, everything that happens in the movie did happen, but not, the character and the conflict is different on film than it would be in an article or in real life. And that's actually what he liked about that. And I'm doing and so, he wanted to see the script, and I was really happy to share it with him, and he had some really good insight that was actually he was the one that wanted me to take it more. He was like, well, maybe at the end this could happen. And I was like, he was the one that wanted more that didn't even happen in real life. But even now I'm adapting another thing now too, where I kind of told the person, like, I don't want to imitate you.
What are you adapting?
I've adapted a David Sedaris story. So I've been working with him on that, and he's much more hands off. He's kind of like, okay, you're the movie person, you go do your movie thing, and he even said that recently, like in an interview about the project. He was just like, okay, I don't care who they cast as me, I don't, that kind of thing, and I actually, for me, if it's really intimately about that person. In both these instances, they are about Davey and David. It's what they would want. And I originally offered David Sedaris, I said, just give me a chance to write it, and if you don't like the script, and he was the one that was like, no, we'll give you the rights, and however it turns out, I just will kind of want to, he's like, I kind of just want to see the final movie. Like, that's, I think, what he's more compelled about and kind of curious about.
Iris, so take us through the sort of writing process of Letters from the June a little bit. Was Clint Eastwood and Paul Haggis constantly breathing down your throat as you were writing, or what?
No, actually, I think the hardest part was the outline, which I was working with Paul Haggis on. So I think we had 3 sessions where, first I had to take the first meeting, and he really liked that. And then the second...
What was your take? What was...
Well, because I knew that they had already been thinking about Ken Watanabe for General Kuribayashi. So I knew he was going to be central to the movie, but I wanted to show other characters, because the problem with the General is that he's sort of the guy behind the desk, and he gives the orders, but he's not really in the thick of it all the time. And so I wanted to create these other characters. And also during my research, I found, this great story about Baron Nishi, the guy who was the Olympian who, he rode horses and
the horse jumper.
Yeah, horse jumper.
If any character, if I had to pick any character that was made up in that movie, I would have said, oh, obviously the horse jumper. But it was,
No,
but
he was
a real
actually
guy.
a real guy, and he did hang out with, Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks, and, he spent a lot of time in LA. He had Charlie Chaplin and I think Mary Pickford at his house in Japan and all this stuff. So he was probably the most famous personality in real life of the war, probably more famous than the general. So I thought I had to put him in there, and then I wanted to show just the everyday guy, the baker, and so I wasn't sure how well that would go over because it's like, oh, that's a lot of characters already, I'm not sure if they're going to go for it, but at the pitch I mentioned these other characters, and Paul just thought it was great. So that was really helpful. So then I went into the second meeting with an outline, and that was the meeting he actually said, you're hired. So I was like, he told me, because I was still working as a web programmer at the time when I was taking all these meetings. I was running off during my lunch hour to do these meetings, and he basically said, oh, you can quit your day job now. And he started making all the calls, and I couldn't believe it. So I didn't actually quit my day job, but
How long did you hang on to your day job?
I hung on to it for a few more months because I wasn't sure until I saw that contract, or until I saw everything signed, I wasn't going to quit. But the second meeting I brought the outline, and then we honed that outline like he wanted me to do a beat sheet. So we honed the beat sheet in the next 2 meetings after that. And then he kind of just said, okay, go. And then he let me, do the script entirely by myself. He wasn't breathing over my back or anything. He was just, he was also really busy on all these other projects. So I did the script, and I gave it to, my first draft, I gave it to Paul Haggis and my agent and Clint Eastwood all at the same time. And my agent screamed at me, you should have put it first. She was so, she said, oh, she was trying to think of how we're going to apologize to them for this horrible writing. And then Clint Eastwood called himself and said, it's a real page turner, I love it. And that was it. He didn't have any notes.
The word page turner.
He did. He said something like that. He said something like, it's a real page turner, and it's great. And I was waiting for but, but there was no but. He didn't have any notes. Paul Haggis had some notes, but Clint Eastwood didn't have any notes. So I think my agent was floored by that. He didn't have any notes, But I think that's the way he works, because I talked to Paul Haggis, and then I've sat in on another Q&A with the writer for Changeling, and they've all said he goes with the first draft. He doesn't go into notes. He doesn't take studio notes either. So you're not getting all this stuff from the studio heads. And
So you didn't get studio notes?
I didn't get studio notes.
Wow.
I didn't get, the only notes I got were from Paul Haggis and Ken Watanabe.
Oh. What did Ken have to say?
Well, he's a brilliant actor, and so he really gets into his character, and he does his own research. So at the end of the day, he felt that he knew the character better than I did. So he would go in and say, he wouldn't do this, I think he would do this, and I did all this research, and I'll show he was sending me all these files that he had on notes about the actual general. So he really gets into his character.
Cool. Bill, did you have to deal with studio notes?
No, actually, we didn't have to deal with studio notes, mostly because the studio rejected the draft. We wrote it for Paramount, and they turned it around, and that was sort of a blessing in all likelihood, because...
Why don't you explain turnaround for people?
Turnaround means that a studio hires you to write something, or they commission a project, and then either before you hand it in or after you hand it in, they say, we changed our mind, we don't want this, thank you. So they allow the producers to set it up somewhere else, so that they can get some of their money back and someone can, we can have an opportunity to get the movie made.
So after it was in turnaround on Paramount, how did it?
After it turned around Paramount, it bumped around for a couple of years actually, where we had various packages come together and then fall apart. Meaning, actors and directors that expressed interest, and it seemed like that the movie might happen with them, and then the pieces wouldn't come together, it would fall apart again. And I think the next significant thing that happened was Mark Gordon, the producer, co-founded this company, Stratus Films, which has since disbanded, which was Bob Yari's former company. He was a financier. And so Yari liked the script and said that he would finance it at a certain level if we could get certain directors and certain actors. And then Lasse Hallstrom, who was represented in my agency at the time, was given the script and he liked it very much. And so we knew Lasse was interested for a while, probably for, again, I think it was in a year that passed, was Lasse sort of thought about it and wasn't sure if he wanted it to be his next movie. And then Lasse decided, yeah, I think that I would do this now. And so he sent it to Richard Gere, who liked it and wanted to play the part. And so then with Lasse and Richard and the financing, that was when it finally actually came together and threatened to happen.
So when from the time that the project first came to you to the time that it was made, how long had passed?
It was, it was 4.5 years, which is not uncommon. That's actually, I would say, since there was a short time from writing something to seeing it made, in my experience.
One of the luxuries of making your own film, right, Kyle, is that you don't really take notes from anybody, except maybe Davey. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I had...
Did you have a lot of autonomy, did you feel?
Well, definitely. I mean, the kind of financing at the time that we sought out was, sort of no strings attached financing. I wasn't gonna... We got non-industry money, so it wasn't, actor-based money.
Where does non-industry money come from?
Well, I don't know now. 4 years ago, it was very different.
No one knows.
Yeah, different types of people had different kinds of money, but it was a lot of just people that you've met in your life, people that other people have told you might be interested. I mean, you think of all the people you've ever met in your life, and you think of all the people they've met in their lives, and there'll be bound to be at least a few of them that have some money they're looking to get their hands off of in a legal way. By that I mean not blood money, of course. But there are movies out there that have been financed that you hear. Stories, independent movies like that have not nothing current, but you hear stories where you're like, oh, that's kind of a little interesting where that money came in from. But so yeah, I didn't have part of the whole thing in trying to make it, and basically trying to make a film that majority of the film is a guy talking to himself for large chunks of it. We had a lot of autonomy. So that was the idea. Like if I was going to go make my first film, and this was going to be the kind of film I was going to make to show people this is the kind of movie I want to make, then that would be the reason to make it that way. And so, but I did try to, notes were important to make sure that I took notes from people, but it was an interesting experience for me that then went into even the editing room too, where it's like, okay, you try to find that line between like humbleness and wanting people's opinions and where is the identity of the film and where you're just like, okay, even if people disagree, this is the kind of movie I want to make. And that was a weird line that I think I'll never really know exactly where that ends and begins. But for me, it was, I took some notes from Davey. He had some really good suggestions. Even like the scene in the trailer when he like takes the call from Nicole and leaves the girl at the bar. Originally, there was the girl at the bar, and there was kind of a call around that time that he didn't choose one over the other. And Davey told me, he goes, there'd be nights when I'd be like flirting with a girl, and then Nicole would call me, so I'd take that call and I'd go off, and he was like, I feel like that needs that choice that the character needs to be in there, and that was a really good note I got from him. And then the actor, same thing. Once we had a lead actor, him and I sat in a room for like 3 days straight and just went through every single line of dialogue. And I guess that's what people call rehearsal. We weren't really like running through scenes. We kind of would, and he would sort of like stand up and try to figure out if he could say the line. If the line didn't really sound right out of his mouth for him or for me, then we would change it. But scenes really, whole scenes or whole arcs of film didn't really change once we were financed.
Bill and Iris, do you have sort of personal people that you go to with your writing? Like, do you show your husband or early drafts? I mean, or do you just kind of keep it within the business circle? Or do you have friends who are writers that you share work with and trade scripts with? I'm just curious.
I think there's both. I'm fortunate because my brother's a writer, and so we communicate a lot and we swap scripts. And there's a couple of other friends who are writers who I know will be brutally honest with me one way or the other. In that they will tell me the hard truths if I need to hear hard truths, or they will tell me, don't let them change anything. This is great, and go, do it the way it is. So both of them are helpful.
Yeah, I had a writers group I was in that there were a couple of writers whose opinions I really trusted in, because they're also writers. They have good notes. I've had my husband who's sitting back there. He's sort of, but his notes usually aren't helpful at all. Because he's not a writer. But I
told him that before, because it would be awfully awkward.
He's actually really too lenient to me. I mean, I think this is great. Thanks, that's really helpful. So my agent, my agent and my manager are the ones who, I get the most honest and helpful feedback, other than the writers group. I mean, the couple of people from my writers group whose opinion I trust. But yeah, it's really hard. I mean, there's other people that I would like to show the script, but because, when you're on a project, you don't want it to go to too many people, and it's kind of hard. So you kind of have to limit it mostly to the people in the business.
You were talking about your manager. I read an interview with you where you were talking about how before Letters from Iwo Jima, your manager or managers didn't know what to do with you in your career. What was that about?
Yeah, there was a time where I was really unhappy with my managers because they're very genre-oriented, so they do a lot of, comic book movies or like horror and things like that. And I think they were trying to put me in there as well, so I would go through my list of this is what I want to work on, and then the one that sounded the most genre-ish, that one, and then I couldn't do it. And
most of your ideas are sort of historically based, or
yeah, there's a lot. There were a lot of historical based ideas that I had, but the one that I'm working on now is not genre, not historical, and they hated it actually. But I was ready to leave, and then but it's just a matter of finding the right person. Like it wasn't there because they're a company. Each individual at the companies has different personalities, and so when I was about to leave, they said, "Wait, give us another chance." And then I found another person there who we fit a lot better, and his tastes are very similar to mine, and he reads kind of the same kind of books that I like, and so then then I found my fit there. So basically, a lot of times it's just trying to find the person to represent you who has the same sort of fit as you, and so now I'm still with them.
So when novels get adapted into films, there's usually a rabid fan base of the original source material, and I know that a lot of screenwriters feel a lot of pressure to sort of stay true to the source material as much as possible. And I'm wondering, as screenwriters who are adapting true events, whether you felt a similar kind of pressure or responsibility to the source being quote-unquote truth, or at least a version of the truth. Big question. Who wants to start?
I can say, for me it was, since mine wasn't necessarily historically relevant, like I wasn't, right, and that's even what I've said before in panels on this discussion. I said, like, well, I did, they're like, how much did you change? And I'm like, well, I could change anything. It's not, no one was getting hurt. I wasn't damaging or rewriting history. There wasn't, it's the film's interaction with the truth, even though I ended up staying really close to it. And now I'm in a slightly different situation and might face more scrutiny with David Sedaris, because he's obviously much more well known and loved than Davey was. And the trick with that project, and the reason he's even allowed it to happen, is that a lot of the elements in his book, his autobiographical kind of stuff, his family and the characters around his family aren't in this story, and that's one of the reasons why he let it happen. So I'm kind of taking a cue from him and his sort of ability to let it go for me, to be like, you know what, I need to just go do whatever I need to do with it. And I sort of found a clever way to change the character's first name to imply that, like, hey, he's not going to talk like David, he's not going to have like that sort of funny nasal voice that he has, and he's not going to look like him, but at the same time, I took most of the dialogue and almost everything you could transpose right into the short story. It's got like a 40-page one, so for me, having adapted like a 2-page article and now or a 3-page article and having 40, 50 pages I was like, I didn't know what to do with it. I was like, this is great, I'll just reformat it into a script and see how it turns out. And it pretty much worked out really well. And people have since read it and be like, I don't know if you really captured Sedaris' voice. And they'd be like, well, I just took everything from what he wrote, so it's definitely his voice. But I mean, that's just perspective people have. People have preconceived notions, and I still feel an allegiance to his tone, and that's why I hunted him down for 2 years, and wanted to get the rights because of what he has. But at the same time, I also want to make a good movie, and I don't, you do see adaptations sometimes. I feel like you have to justify it, like why adapt it? It can't just be like, oh, I really love that book. Like, well, okay, just because you loved it, maybe you loved it because it is a book, not because it has to be something cinematic, I think. And finding so like, I don't know if there's anything else like David has written other than this one story that I would necessarily think that I can make a good movie out of. And I think asking yourself that question every step along the way, like, what's the best way to make a movie out of this, and try to find those complex ways of breaking the story as it goes.
Bill, since Clifford was such a charlatan, I wonder, did you feel sort of less responsibility to? You mentioned that you didn't do any fact checking or anything like that, and so you were like, well, whatever he says.
I did actually do a tremendous amount of fact checking on all the information in the movie that had to do with historical events, that had to do with Howard Hughes, that had to do with Richard Nixon. So with that, I was actually as sort of consciously not conscious of fact-checking with the sort of Clifford-centric story. I was doing extremely conscious of fact-checking and really having long annotations and very detailed stuff that had to do with Watergate and Nixon and Hughes and these kind of things that were in it. So it's sort of like a dual perspective. But it was definitely it's an interesting question because I actually felt like I had a strong commitment to my source material, which ironically meant commitment to Clifford's version of events, which was often contradictory, which he was a pathological liar, he would tell different versions of different things. And so it wound up informing the way I created the narrative, because I wound up having to use things like fantasy or flights of fancy to incorporate certain stories that he would tell or notions that he would have of what was happening to him. There was a moment.
There's that scene where he gets thrown out the window of a very tall building.
Right.
So how did that go?
It was too tall. It should have been like 4 stories. It looks like it's about 35 stories in the film. But yeah, that was sort of my inspiration for that, was a story that he told, again, this collaborator of mine, about when Howard Hughes' people came to him and took him to Houston, where they, took him into a room and showed him files that they had on Richard Nixon and dirt that they had on him, which seemed like an implicit endorsement, that Hughes himself was endorsing this fake autobiography as a way of pressuring Richard Nixon. So I thought that was, in a sense, like the narrative heart of the movie. I thought that was fascinating. And I'm pretty sure it didn't happen. It probably didn't happen. He told the story with a lot of conviction to Josh, and it wasn't something that you could, go back and prove, because none of the Hughes companies were in existence anymore, wouldn't have admitted to it if they were. So it was, and so that wound up expressing itself in the film by the connection and the relationship that he has to Howard Hughes and Howard Hughes' representatives wind up being part of a kind of a fractured fantasy that he has about a relationship with the guy he thinks he has and maybe he doesn't really have.
Right. I heard that Clifford doesn't necessarily like the movie.
Oh, he really doesn't like the movie.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, well, that's, that was, we opened the New York Times at one, because Clifford actually, he did see the final draft and he signed off on it and, legally gave us all the rights after he had seen the screenplay to go ahead and produce it. And he did say at that time that he had problems with it too. He gave a whole bunch of notes, some of which we took, many of which we didn't. But then after the film came out, he said that this movie is a hoax about a hoax. And it didn't, I love this particular quote, it didn't capture the truth of what happened. And so I had this sort of ironic and interesting task of, being, he was actually on Nightline talking at one point, talking about the movie and talking about how it was, it was a hoax, it was a misrepresentation of what he did, and really, and lying in what he was saying to people about what he said to us. Like, it was so confusing and so interesting that when he said that on Nightline, my feeling was my work here is done. Like, this is great. I'm delighted at this controversy and this insanity over it.
So, Iris, what about you? So you're adapting, historical events, and I don't know if a writer who adapts historical events that's in history books feels a greater responsibility to the story, to the truth of the story.
Well, one thing I did find out, because I've since worked on pitches and things for other stories that are true, and it's a lot easier to write true stories about dead people that are alive, because you don't worry as much as, what is he going to think about it, or what is his family going to think, because you can make up a lot more. And I did have some fictional characters in my story that I could make up a lot of stuff about. There was a lot of, with the two true characters, which was General Kuribayashi and Baron Nishi, Clint Eastwood and Ken Watanabe and other people, I guess, they visited the descendants of the two and, listened to their stories, and they did kind of, want me to be sensitive to them and the stories that they told. In fact, the one story, again, that seems just incredible, like it should have been fiction, is the letter that the Baron Nishi reads or finds on the flamethrower that he tries to rescue. Clint Eastwood came back from visiting his descendants and told me, he would really like to see that in the movie with the letter. And that's the part that everyone thought, that can't be true, because that was the one that seemed the most fictional. But that came out of respect with the families and listening to the stories that they had to tell. But definitely, it was pretty much easy to write dead characters. Like, there were a couple characters that were based on true characters, but I just changed their name, and then it was fine. They were the bad guys. So I know, like, if I use their real name, their descendants might get upset. So what I did is I just changed their names. And that's what I was, actually, a lot of the names that I had originally for the characters, I was asked to change all their names, because if their names actually existed in the burial records, they said, change the name, because someone with that name actually was in the war, and we don't want to hurt anyone, so let's just change all the names.
The film was like a huge hit in Japan, correct?
Yes, it was a much bigger hit.
That was a surprise.
Here.
Right. Well, but here though, it was the year that Flies of Our Fathers was supposed to be the big awards movie, but it ended up being Letters from Iwo Jima that was nominated for an Oscar and viewed for original screenplay, so that was a surprise as well.
Oh yeah, it was all a surprise, I think. From the moment I started working on the screenplay to the end, it's a surprise. Yeah, because it started out, they kept telling me, okay, it's a companion film to Flags to Our Fathers. And neither my agent or I knew what the hell a companion movie is. We thought, is this something that's going on the DVD as an extra? What does that mean? And then, when I was talking to Paul Haggis going over the outline, I said, is this actually going to go in theaters? And he said, yes. I said, oh, really? Is it actually going to be shown here in the U.S.? And he said, yes. And I just, oh, really? I didn't know. But it wasn't going to be released till the following year. Like, they were releasing in Japan first because they just kind of knew that it would do well in Japan, but they weren't sure, how it would do here. So they weren't going to release it till February of the following year, and then I guess the rumor is, so I don't know if this is true, but someone told me that Steven Spielberg finally took a look at the movie and really liked it and said, let's move it up, and then they moved it to release earlier so that it actually had a chance in the awards. And oh gosh, Ken Watanabe, I remember we were in the airport heading to Japan, and we were told from the PR person that they were moving it up, and we were just like, we were so excited, we were so happy. And the PR person's like, oh God, now I've got to do the whole thing over. Like, she was so angry. To the PR, move it all up, and all this, and she was just so upset. And Ken and I were like jumping out of our seats.
I have a billion more questions, but I'm going to open up to the audience for a Q&A in just a few moments. But before we do that, I thought we would actually hold this raffle thing that we're doing. We're raffling away a DVD copy of Letters from Iwo Jima, along with an MPW t-shirt, a DVD copy of The Hoax, along with an MPW t-shirt, and also Easier with Practice, along with a t-shirt. So there will be 3 winners tonight, 3 lucky winners if you fill out your raffle ticket and pass them to Howard, who is collecting. So pass them to your left. So pass them down the aisle to your left, and Howard will collect them. Who doesn't have one? All right. The winner of the Easier with Practice DVD, along with an NPW t-shirt in your size, is, have Kyle choose. And our first winner is?
It's Harley.
Harley! Where are you? Yay! Come on down come and see Howard after the discussion. We will get your info. We're going to mail you your prize. All right, and the winner of the HOAX DVD along with an MPW t-shirt is Lauren Signorino. Lauren! Congratulations! And taking home the Letters from Iwo Jima DVD along with an MPW t-shirt is
Ariana Burrow.
Ariana! Where are you? Oh, congratulations. Congratulations. All right, so let's open up the forum for any questions you all might have for any one of our panelists. Anybody want to start the Q&A? Yes, let's go all the way in the back.
I have a question. Iris, did you write the movie in Japanese?
No, I wrote it in English. They had 3 translators work on the translation. I think they had a studio translation done first. Ken Watanabe read it and thought it was a poor translation. He had 2 other translators translate it, and then I guess they took the best out of each to make the final.
And do you know enough Japanese to feel happy about the translation, or do you?
It's interesting because when the officers talk, I have no idea what they're saying. When the privates talk, I understand. So it's because it's a level of formality. But I mean, everyone who I talked to, because I have a lot of friends who are native Japanese speakers, said that it was a good translation. So I was happy with that.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. All right, so let's go this gentleman right here.
I'm just wondering, what's your individual writing processes? How long do you do it a day? Where do you do it?
Do you all write every day?
I definitely don't. I mean, I write sort of out of necessity. Like, so far I haven't written anything for I haven't written anything on assignment, so I haven't written anything for anyone else no one's paid me to write yet. So I sort of writing for myself, and basically that means I try to do it as quickly as possible because I don't necessarily like being by myself. So both of my scripts I've written, in terms of for me it's like both of my scripts, the first draft I've written in 10 days or less, just out of the hopes of getting it, just reaching the end. That's really, it's really painful for me, but I do enjoy it. I mean, I'm exaggerating slightly, but I pretty much, and then I rewrite. I take more time with because I feel like you need a little bit of distance to realize what works and what doesn't.
Bill, what about you? Do you get up at 4 a.m. in the morning and type away?
No, I'm not a big 4 a.m. person. I mean, I have found that my individual writing process changes depending on the project that I'm working on.
Well, you're on a TV show now, so you're...
Right this second I am, yes, which is actually, I'm not really writing, I'm helping break the story from this.
What show is it?
It's a show called The Cape that my younger brother is doing, but I told him I would help him out. I had a good time doing it. Most of what I do, though, usually happens on my own. And so, it changes. There are times when I'll feel like because of a particular kind of material, I will want it to come out really fast. And so I'll do the same thing. I'll try to write a really, really fast draft and sort of get like an unprocessed, straight from the unconscious kind of version. And then there are other pieces of material, more often the true stories that I've worked on, where it's a very, very research-intensive process. I'll just be reading and reading and reading, often traveling to the places where the events either took place or where I can talk to people who can give me information about the events. And I find that a lot of the writing happens just in that process of researching, while you're reading and while you're interviewing people or while you're looking at, I don't know why, but for some reason photographs are very important to me. Looking at the actual buildings and places where people sat and what were the actual physical environments like and typical days like for people. So I'll spend a lot of time doing that. And then the actual drafts vary. I'm pretty slow in general. I would say a first draft takes me 4 to 6 months, and then the rewriting can take as long as another year and a half after that, or sometimes it's faster.
Iris, if you're, so let's see, your first draft apparently was so good. So I'm guessing that, do you rewrite as you go along, or I mean, you don't just spit it out?
I think again the process is different for each project. I also like to do what I call the vomit draft, which is you just get through so that you can get to the end. So you're not stuck anywhere. You just go with train of thought and just go and try to get to the end, and then go back and you edit. With the letters from Iwo Jima, that was a different process because we spent a lot of time with the beat sheet, and that I don't always do beat sheets, but
why don't you explain beat sheet to those people who might not know?
Beat sheet is sort of like you're outlining your script, but you're almost like you have a sentence for every scene. So it's a very detailed outline because you have pretty much every scene written out as a sentence. So before you even start the script, where you're going, what your problems are, and I would say that makes the actual writing of the script a lot easier if you do have a beat sheet to start off with. But the problem is that I found with a beat sheet is it doesn't work so well when you're by yourself. Like if I had a partner, it probably work a lot better because then you can go over your beat sheet and say, oh, this is not good. So like when I was bouncing off with Paul Haggis, then there was someone who could actually say, oh, that doesn't sound good, or that you lose that, or whatever. When you're working in a vacuum, it's a lot harder because you'll be pretty much writing what you would have written on your script, your vomit draft anyway. But if you do have someone that you can bounce off ideas with, whether you have a writing partner or if you have a writer's group or something, that putting it all on a beat sheet, when you actually write the script, it's so much easier because you know exactly where you're going. And I know people. There was one person in my writer's group who frustrated me so much to no end because she was stuck. She didn't do the outline, and she would write 15 pages or whatever her script, and then edit it, and every week it was the same 15 pages. She could never get past because she was so meticulous about, every note, making those first 15 pages perfect. So I would not recommend that because it's better to do the vomit draft. Get somewhere.
Because you will upset Iris if you do. All right, I think do we have a question over here? No? Okay. All right, over here, sir.
What are your thoughts about writing with a subject that you're basing a screenplay on? Like actually writing with the person that you're writing this story for.
Like, I've never done that, but like what it would be like, or, I mean, I think I would have a little, my concern, like there's a book I'm trying to track down now, and I know that the author has maybe like written it's not a true story, but she's written a version of the screenplay already for it, and my fear, not that this is what necessarily hold true, like I said, Davey on mine wanted to like add stuff, that didn't even happen, but my fear would always be like, that they're really connected to like either their life or connected to the book that they wrote, and would have a hard time saying, okay, well maybe, no, we don't need that scene where it really looks good on film or whatever. I would be concerned about that, but I'd certainly be curious, Because you have more to college.
Well, I would really think long and hard before doing that, because the experiences that I've had and some of the other folks that I know have had has been that you're sort of by definition hindered if you're working with your subject, because that subject, it's almost impossible for a person to be able to escape their own identity or escape their own things that they might be embarrassed about or uncomfortable with, or relationships that they don't want to unsettle, enough to really attack the narrative and to address the flaws of this character the way that I think you would need to for it to be a really compelling story. And so all the experiences I've had with living subjects, I've had two, have been difficult. Well, I mean, the one with Clifford obviously was quite difficult. And then even another that I did after that, where I really wanted to please the subject, I really wanted to make him happy with it. He struggled with it too.
Can you say who that is?
Well, I prefer not to. But it was basically a situation pretty much exactly the same, where a person creates a piece of source material, and their heart is in it, and their life is in it, and it's a very, very different experience when you are sitting in a theater and you're watching a film that's going to be essentially a testament, a document of your life and who you were as a person and what your life meant, or whether you're a writer using the raw material of that person's life to create a story. Obviously, there's a lot more flexibility. You're God. Sort of like, what do I want this story to mean? What am I attracted to? What is the moral flaw in this character? What's the arc of, where I think this character should go organically? And so there's this great book by Janet Malcolm called The Journalist and the Murderer, which really takes this very frank perspective on the fact that a journalist and their subject are adversaries. That as much as they, might really be nice people and they want the best for each other, the journalist wants what the subject least wants to give them, which is that sort of whatever is the sort of darkest, most hidden, most morally complicated area of who that person is. And I think that a dramatist wants the same thing So it doesn't mean I would say never do it, and I think that you can have I think people have had probably great experiences, but I don't think you can find, I think you'll find happier movies that I'm not as drawn to. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I like the movie Ray, but it's not the kind of movie that I would ever really be drawn to write, because I don't really think it was a film that was able to, I shouldn't have gone after the darkness of whoever that character was. Because we love Ray Charles, and who wants to do that or go there? But, so I think I think twice.
Next question. All right. Amy.
I'm curious how the process of working on each of these scripts has changed you as writers.
For me, I in these last two that I've written, I've kind of come to this realization that actually, as a writer, as a filmmaker, I'm interested in a really broad type of material. But as a writer, I actually really do have a heart in adaptation. I have a really hard time writing any original idea I've had that I've turned into a screenplay. I've written with someone else, but any adaptation I've wanted to do, I've always wanted to do alone. So I think that's how it's changed me. I think I'm learning how to, as we were even just talking about in the industry, your identity is kind of an important part about how people see you or hire you for. And for me, I'm realizing that I think part of that identity for me as a writer will be adaptation, or is adaptation, and that I really love that.
So Iris, working on Letters from Iwo Jima, has that changed your process any? I mean, are you working on beat sheets nowadays, or?
I definitely always do an outline. Like I said, it's harder with the beat sheet unless you have someone who is available to bounce those things back to you and tell you,
And your husband can do it.
But, yeah. But when I found that when I'm working on a pitch, it's similar to doing a beat sheet. Like I'm working on one now, and it's in almost as much detail as doing a beat sheet. And
why don't you explain working on a pitch for those people who might not know?
So yeah, that's one thing that probably a lot of people don't know, is that a lot of the work that's involved with the screenwriter is not actually screenwriting. A lot of it is taking meetings, doing pitches, you probably know that, and trying to get your work sold. So a lot, there's spec scripts, which is you write speculatively. So you have your own idea, you option an idea, and no one is paying you to do it, and you write the script, and you're doing it on your own time and money. Then there are assignments, which Letters from Iwo Jima was an assignment because it was their concept, and then you come up with a take, with an idea, and then they'll hire you to actually write the script. So, Hollywood these days, it's kind of hard to find an assignment that's paid for. So what I find that I'm doing a lot of times is I come on board with the producer, and we pitch together to the entities that might have money who could finance the project, who might pay me to write the script. So then I go in with the producers, and so maybe they've optioned something, they've optioned someone's life rights, or if they've optioned a book or whatever, and they want to put you in as a writer, but we have to go pitch to these other people. So we work, we do all these meetings, and then I have my take again, but it's written out, and then I'll go over with them, and they'll say, no, why don't you do this, or we like this part of the story, but not this part, and you work a lot for free.
It sounds like you're doing a ton of work
Yes.
for free. You actually get the gig, right?
Yeah, and so this particular one that I'm doing, I usually try not to give them a outline, because then it is like work. They're basically giving you all the nitpicky little things about this scene or this scene until you get it till where they're happy. But it's all a gamble, because no one may want this story in the end, and you've just wasted a lot of time. But that's kind of the state of things right now in Hollywood. As for me, I don't know about you guys, but that's how it's been for me.
I think we have time for a couple more questions. So let's go to the front row here.
I'm curious about you and Watanabe giving you notes about his character. Was this happening during filming, or did it happen before filming? And did you change the script according to his notes since Mr. Eastwood found it to be such a great character?
When I got notes from both Paul Haggis and Ken Watanabe after the first draft, and so I tried to work on them, but I think Clint Eastwood was pretty much, he liked the first draft, so he said, oh, I wouldn't change it too much. You can address their notes, but he said, in the end, it's up to him. So if he didn't like the note, or if he didn't like what I changed, then he actually put it back to the way it was before, which was interesting. But definitely we would discuss. So Ken would give me a note, and then I would discuss it with Clint Eastwood in his office, and they might say, or they say, oh well, you can try and address that. So it was sort of like they were notes that he didn't think that they would make or break the movie, but if I wanted to do it, then I could try to incorporate his notes to make everyone happy, and then ultimately I think Clint Eastwood would kind of make decisions in the cutting room floor too. So as far as like script notes in terms of dialogue, neither I nor Clint were very savvy as to the nitpicky, the Japanese expression of it. As long as what it said was the same as the meaning as what I had in the script, neither of us could really say, okay, say it that way instead of that way. It was all in Japanese.
All right, I think we had one over here. Yes.
Regarding the financing of the film, other than the film, how do you, when you find the investors, how is this money given to you? Is it given as a grant, or how do you start?
Oh, I mean, that's a really complex sort of question to answer. It comes in as equity, not as a grant, but some films are financed with a combination of grants and equity, grants from organizations or grants from states, but it was an investment, so, it's, essentially a check. And you have an agreement in a contract that says, okay, they'll make their money back plus a premium, so their money back plus it's usually somewhere between 10 and 20%, and then after that, then you split the profits, if there are them, and you split those profits based on an agreed percentage. So it's a lot of times it's 50-50, but a lot of times it'll be 60-40 in favor of the investor. And then you have to also negotiate whether or not talent can have upfront points and all this stuff. And you kind of turn, to make anyways what would take almost days or hours to answer. Like basically you kind of turn yourself, you and your producer or whatever entity you create into like a mini studio, and you do have contracts that say, okay, this money will be brought in and will be handled this way. This is how the accounting will be, and it has to all be agreed upon before any money is handed over. In most instances, unless you find someone who is just being very nice and writes you a check and doesn't want to hear it back. But tell me who they are, because I'm looking for more. So.
We can continue this chat informally. We're going to have a reception out in the lobby. You could also chat with our guests here as well. Thank you, Kyle, Bill, and Iris for being here. Thank you.